Hi everyone, James Spears here. This is an introductory presentation on acupuncture and myofascial lines for the treatment of the neck, back, and shoulders. So what I want to introduce you to here are the myofascial lines as written about by Tom Myers in his book Anatomy Trains. And we can see here that this deep back arm line, it looks a lot like the small intestine meridian, and then the superficial back arm line is this one over here. It includes the trapezius and then the deltoid and then the forearm extensor muscles right down here. So it's important to understand these myofascial lines as acupuncturists because it gives us an anatomical basis for the meridians. But we also need to understand that structure and function are always interrelated. So by understanding the anatomy or the structure, it's going to help us to better understand the function of the points. So keep in mind as you study this material, this relationship between structure and function, because this anatomical grounding of the meridians in these myofascial lines can help us to have a better appreciation and understanding of the functional aspects of the points. Okay, so let me show you some other lines here. These are what's known as the superficial back line. It looks a lot like the urinary bladder meridian. And then we've got the superficial front line that looks like the stomach meridian, and then the lateral line. Now, one thing to notice about these is that these myofascial lines, they converge in the areas of the ankles, as we see here, and then the neck. So the leg lines, then they have convergence in the neck and the feet, whereas the arm lines have convergence in the hands and the wrists and then the neck. And we see that for all of these myofascial lines. Now, this is really important, and it relates to things like imaging that we use in the balance method and Master Tung style, as well as the traditional adages about if you want to influence a meridian, you can needle the opposite side from where the symptoms are located to get a good result. So this is all interrelated, and this is something I discuss in more detail. Now, another benefit of learning about these myofascial lines is that it helps us to better understand structure and alignment. And as acupuncturists, we may not have gotten a lot of training in structure and alignment, but this is really important for us to understand. And other doctors that are using acupuncture, such as physical therapists and chiropractors and osteopaths, like they have a lot of understanding about structural issues, but this tends to be a gap in a lot of acupuncturist knowledge. So one thing that I present in my course is how to start accounting for structure and alignment, because if you're not doing that, then there's a gap that's missing. And when you start to fill that in by just understanding 4 basic fundamental things, then that can give you a much better handle on your point prescriptions. So let's look at an example here. Now, this is a common seated posture that a lot of people have in today's modern world, where they're hunched over and their head is shifted forward, their back is hunched over. And what this is going to do is going to stretch that superficial back line here as everything moves forward and hunches over, but it's going to contract this line. And that can cause pain in these muscles here. It can cause pain in the area of GB21 as well, so right in here. So it's really important for acupuncturists to start accounting for some of the structural things. Now, you can combine this with the meridian systems and the balance method, and you can even combine it with Zong Fu methods of pattern identification. So it can easily be integrated into our traditional methods. But, if you're treating someone with neck pain and you're not accounting for structural issues like this, then you're missing a major element in your diagnosis and in your treatment strategies. So this is something that I go into more detail in with this course, but I also discuss the traditional points as well as the Master Tung points and how they are related. So you can see here that the traditional points like lung 7, located here down on the styloid process of the radius, it corresponds roughly to some of the Master Tung points, 33.13 and 33.14. Now these are located more proximally, but these are really good points for treating neck and shoulder conditions. Now, It's important to understand the way that the traditional points relate to the Tung points, and that's something that I go into great detail in my course. And another thing I want to introduce you to here that's related to this is in the Tung system, we have a unique way of numbering the points. So the points on the fingers have the 11 prefix, and then points on the hand are given the 22 prefix. Now, this is really important for a biomedical understanding of acupuncture as well, because we know that the points on the hands and on the feet, they elicit a strong neurological response because in the cortex, the sensory area of the hands and feet, it occupies a larger area. So if you understand some of the basics of the anatomy and physiology and things like we've just discussed with these being more neurologically sensitive, that is an important thing to consider when you create your point prescriptions, because these different groups are going to have different myofascial responses, different neurological responses, and different responses on the internal organs. So really important thing to understand. I'm just going to leave it at that for now since this is an introductory presentation. But I want to show you some other things that I discuss in this course. So these points here on the San Jiao Line, 33.08 and 33.09, these are some of Master Tung's points, and really great points for treating sciatica and upper back pain, and probably points that a lot of acupuncturists are not using. So in my course, I go into the detailed anatomy of these points and when you should use them over points like San Jiao 5. So if you're doing TCM, you may be using San Jiao 5 and San Jiao 3 for treating GB21 pain, but you're probably not using these points. And if you're doing the Master Tung style, then when do you choose these points over the points on the hands? Well, that's something I discuss in more detail in my course as well. I want to show you another thing here too about how we approach the anatomy. Now right here, this is an important thing to consider. We've got three different muscles here. We got the flexor pollicus longus and the pronator teres and then the brachioradialis. And you can see that these two muscles converge down in the area of lung 7, and then this one crosses across the forearm from like the heart meridian over. Now, this is really important to understand this stuff because it will give you some insights into how the points work anatomically and when you can use certain points for pain in different areas of the body. So another thing that I cover in my course are case studies. We go into detail with other muscles here. You can see the splenius capitis. It's really important to understand what myofascial line this is on and what point groups will get to it. So let's see, I'll give you another example here. And this one, I talk about the Extensor Digitorum longus. So this muscle, it attaches at the head of the fibula, but then it extends down between the gallbladder and stomach meridian. And then in the Tung system, we use a group of points, the 3 weights right in here. And then remember that stomach 38 is located about right there, and we use that for shoulder conditions. Now these points can work in a similar way, but they're a little bit different too because they're in different muscles. These groups of points here are different than the points in the tibialis anterior over here too. So in my course, there's one other thing I want to show you about here, the psoas muscle. You know, a lot of low back pain patterns can be related to the psoas, and it's really important as acupuncturists to be able to know when the psoas is affected and involved in low back pain, and what point groups we can use to best treat that back pain when the psoas is involved. So I think that you can see from these myofascial lines that there's a lot of correspondence with the meridians, and by having a better understanding of the anatomy and the various muscles on these lines, then we can still apply our traditional principles, but we can refine them and alter them in a way that will ultimately get us better clinical results. So for more information, click the link below, subscribe to the list, or just take the course. You'll be glad that you did because it's going to help you tremendously. Your clients are going to get better results. You'll be able to use fewer needles and have a better understanding of how to integrate structural issues in with the traditional methods. And that's all I have to say for now. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and keep doing well at getting people better.